So what do I call you anyway?
I am a Trimaxian drone ship from...
Trimaxian?
Affirmative.
Okay, I'll call you Max. It's easier.
Max?
Right.
My father was not really a movie lover, but he was extremely fond of this film, to the point that he made me watch it again up to 4 times. And to this day, I still clearly remember the scene of the shimmering metal ship streaking across the Florida sky. The boy David, waking up in the hospital with bewildered eyes and Max's mischievous voice echoing from the control panel. All of it like a beautiful dream that made him laugh out loud every time Max teased David. But the deeper I dug into the behind the scenes, the more I discovered strange details that I had previously not noticed at all. Did you know that the inspiration for the liquid metal ship actually came from a laundry detergent commercial? Or that the boy David was almost not Joey Cramer? And even the psychological pressure on set and the financial chaos that nearly killed the film. Let's unveil 20 facts that have never been revealed in today's video. 20. The ship's design was inspired by a laundry detergent commercial. The first time I saw the ship in Flight of the Navigator 1986, its sheer size and grandeur left me in awe. I couldn't help wondering how anyone could create a piece of metal so glossy, reflecting everything around it, while also smoothly warping and changing shape. That Trimaxian drone ship with its mirror-like shimmering surface didn't just fly, it seemed to flow, constantly morphing its form, something that felt almost magical in an era when CGI was still in its infancy. In reality, the core inspiration came from a 1985 Tide commercial that Jeff Kleiser, the brother of director Randall Kleiser, had worked on. In that ad, a bottle of detergent flows and morphs seamlessly into a map of the United States. Jeff brought that same reflectance mapping technique, projecting environmental reflections onto a surface and morphing effect into the film, creating the illusion of perfectly reflective liquid metal. The filmmakers used CGI very sparingly, only in key moments to keep both the budget and a sense of realism under control. This distinctive liquid style later went on to inspire James Cameron when he created the T-1000 in Terminator 2. A down-to-earth idea born from a commercial TV ad unexpectedly paved the way for Hollywood's first era of reflective CGI, transforming the ship from a vague concept into an unforgettable symbol of childhood wonder. 19. A skateboard accident on set.
Request instructions?
I don't know. Just get us out of here.
Compliance.
At the time, the studio tried hard to keep a fairly serious accident under wraps so it wouldn't disrupt the tightly packed shooting schedule. Joey Cramer, the young actor playing David, was moving between setups when a skateboard slammed straight into his mouth. His lip was torn open, blood flowed freely, and the swelling appeared almost immediately. The production was in Florida, with every minute of the schedule already locked in, so no one dared to stop for long. Joey received only basic first aid, and then he was sent back to continue filming. In several scenes, shot shortly afterward, the camera angles were deliberately adjusted to avoid close-ups of his face, favouring wider or angled shots to conceal the injury. The lighting was also carefully softened, so the swelling wouldn't stand out on camera. The incident wasn't classified as a dangerous stunt, so there was no special insurance involved. It was treated simply as an everyday accident on set. Joey endured the pain and completed his performance without a single complaint. In later interviews, he mentioned that the small scar is still there, a quiet reminder of those exhausting summer days. 18. Heavy psychological pressure on the child actor. Few people realise that life on the set of Flight of the Navigator was a place of intense psychological pressure for Joey Cramer, the boy who played David. At the time, Hollywood had nowhere near the strict child protection regulations it has today. Joey was often isolated, there were no other kids his age to play with. Constant night shoots threw his daily rhythm into chaos, and he frequently had to stay awake all night only to collapse into sleep the following morning. There were no dedicated child psychologists or counselors on set. Everything simply carried on in the silence of the adults around him. Joey had to perform scenes of loneliness and disorientation in the vastness of space, while in real life he was experiencing a very similar sense of isolation himself. After the film's release in 1986, the pressure only intensified. Classmates teased him, calling him the alien kid, labeling him as strange, and making it difficult for him to fit in. In later interviews, Joey admitted that those months left lasting marks on him, even though he remains proud of the role he played. 17. The film was inspired by a nightmare. If you're a fan of Flight of the Navigator, you probably know that the story revolves around a boy who disappears and then returns 8 years later without having aged a single day. What few people know is that the entire concept originated from a real nightmare experienced by screenwriter Mark H. Baker. One night, Baker dreamed that he himself was pulled into a strange temporal void, years passed in the outside world, but for him, it felt like only a brief moment. The sense of loss, isolation, and the terror of having time stolen from him was so powerful that he woke up and immediately began writing it down. The original script was titled Vanished, and it was far darker than the version we know. David was not gently returned home. Instead, he was held as an experimental subject. The ship was manipulative rather than helpful, and the ending left a lingering sense of unease. After the commercial failure of Return to Oz, Disney insisted on softening the script to suit a younger audience, adding humour, the friendship with Max, and a warm, comforting ending. 16. Filming in Norway under extreme conditions. While watching the film, I always wondered why the ship's interior scenes felt so strange and cold, so different from the warm Florida atmosphere of the exterior shots. The reason is that the crew had to fly to Norway to shoot the spaceship interiors, a decision driven by Viking Films' involvement and financial considerations. Accustomed to Florida's sunshine, the crew suddenly found themselves in a Norwegian winter that felt like frozen hell temperatures below 0 Celsius, bone-chilling dampness, and weak natural light lasting only a few hours a day. The children on set, including Joey Cramer, suffered severe cold shock, shivering uncontrollably in their thin costumes. Many scenes had to be reshot because actors' hands shook too badly to hold props, or because their breath formed visible white clouds on camera, ruining the illusion of outer space. The ship interiors were built inside a warehouse on the outskirts of Oslo, where icy wind whistled through the cracks day and night. The cast and crew wore extra layers beneath their costumes, yet still struggled with numbness from the cold. Ironically, these harsh conditions helped create the film's distinctive atmosphere, warmly American in its outdoor scenes, yet eerily foreign and cold in its interiors, carrying a subtle European chill. 15. A legendary director who wanted in. You may not know this, but Brian De Palma, famed for psychological thrillers like Carrie Scarface and The Untouchables, once expressed strong interest in directing Flight of the Navigator. When the original Vanished script circulated, De Palma was drawn to its darker potential. A child trapped in time experiments the terror of isolation, and a ship that manipulated rather than rescued. His version would likely have been far more abrasive, with a slower pace and a deep focus on psychological obsession, closer to the unsettling style he mastered so well. Disney, however, was still shaken by the box office failure of Return to Oz 1985 and unwilling to take such a risk. They wanted something safe and child-friendly, so they passed on De Palma and instead partnered with PSO Productions and Norway's Viking Films. That decision ultimately meant the movie lacked a strong Disney brand identity in many countries outside the US. Posters and credits often listed only independent producers, leading some audiences at the time to assume it was a European or indie film. 14. The actors who almost became David. Of course, Joey Cramer's performance as David is unforgettable. I still tear up every time I reach the hospital scene where he wakes up staring in confusion at a world that has changed by 8 years while he himself hasn't aged at all. His innocence and sincerity make the character feel deeply relatable. But few people know that Joey almost didn't get the role. Before casting him, the filmmakers seriously considered 2 other names: Chris O'Donnell, then an emerging teen with a clean-cut, handsome look, and Joaquin Phoenix, credited at the time as Joaquin Bottom, a young actor already capable of remarkable emotional depth. Both auditioned and performed well. In the end, director Randall Kleiser and his team chose Joey because he felt the most natural. He didn't come across as an overly professional child actor. Joey embodied the essence of an ordinary kid: messy hair, awkward expressions, and raw, unfiltered emotions that made audiences empathize with him instead of feeling distanced. 13. The ship was once treated like trash. The physical model of the Trimaxion drone ship, the film's shimmering icon, nearly vanished forever. After filming, Wrapped, the prop was forgotten in a storage facility left exposed to the elements for years. Its glossy paint peeled away, metal parts rusted, and thick layers of dust settled over it. At the time, few people thought of children's films as something worth preserving. Years later, a group of fans stumbled upon it in an old studio warehouse. They were shocked to see their childhood friend reduced to what looked like scrap metal. Thanks to the dedication of the fan community, the model was recovered and painstakingly restored, the metallic surface polished old lights, replaced with LEDs, and even a gentle rotation mechanism added to better match the film. Today, it appears at fan events and film museums, standing as proof of the enduring power of nostalgia. The story is a reminder that childhood icons can be far more fragile than we think, nearly lost forever, simply through neglect. Fortunately, the love of fans saved it, turning trash back into treasure once again. 12. The film's director had previously made Grease. Randall Kleiser, the name forever associated with Grease. 1978. The iconic teen musical may seem like the most unexpected choice imaginable for Flight of the Navigator. He went from exuberant dance numbers and high school romance with John Travolta and Olivia Newton-John to directing a science fiction film for children. This shift, however, was far from accidental. Kleiser has always been drawn to stories about youth discovery and moments of wonder experienced by ordinary people. Notably, the film opens in 1978, the very year Grease was released, an intriguing coincidence that subtly evokes that era. Kleiser carried his gentle, warm storytelling sensibility from musical cinema into sci-fi, focusing on David's emotions and his friendship with Max rather than high-octane action. Despite the drastic genre change, his approach kept the film grounded and sincere, preventing it from becoming cold or mechanical, like many space-themed movies of the time. Even decades later, fans can still sense traces of Grease within the film. Its innocence, light humour, and an enduring belief in simple goodness. 11. The film once had several different titles. When people think of Flight of the Navigator, the title sounds familiar and captivating, evoking a soaring journey and the exploration of space. But few know that the film almost carried completely different names, and each was rejected for its own reasons. Originally, Mark H. Baker's first script was titled vanished. A direct reflection of the core idea the boy David disappears for 8 years and then returns as if nothing had happened. The title sounded dark and haunting, fitting a version of the story that was far more somber than the final film. Later, the team tried Space Boy, a cuter, more childlike title that emphasized an ordinary kid wandering into outer space. However, many at Disney felt it was too naive, lacking depth and a sense of grand adventure. Another proposed title was Grounded, alluding to David being stuck on Earth after returning or the ship being grounded in an emergency landing. But this was criticized for being dull, slightly depressing, and failing to suggest flight or wonder. In the end, Flight of the Navigator was chosen because it struck the right balance, mysterious yet inviting flight, suggesting a journey, Navigator a guide. It evoked space adventure without being overly dark or childish. The title perfectly balanced science fiction with a warm, coming-of-age story, helping the film connect with a much broader audience. 10. The real-life tragedy of Joey Cramer. Joey Cramer was once a childhood icon for many viewers, but his real life took a far more tragic path, worlds away from his innocent on-screen image. After the film's release, Joey gradually drifted away from Hollywood in the late 1980s, appearing in only a few minor roles before disappearing from the spotlight. The pressure of early fame isolation on set and unresolved psychological trauma from his time as a child actor eventually led him into addiction. In 2016, at age 45, Joey was arrested for robbing a bank in British Columbia, Canada. He used a fake gun to threaten employees, took the money, and fled, only to be quickly apprehended. The news shocked fans. The once beloved alien kid was now involved in a serious crime. Joey later admitted that drug and alcohol addiction were the root causes following multiple failed attempts at rehabilitation. Thankfully, after serving his sentence, Joey turned his life around. He became a counselor for at-risk youth struggling with addiction, using his own story as a cautionary tale. In recent talks and interviews, he has expressed deep regret but also pride in having emerged from the darkness to help others. 9. Max's voice almost sounded completely different. Can you imagine Max, the witty, mischievous ship, with a cold, emotionless, robotic voice, instead of the playful tone we know? That was actually the original plan, meant to emphasize the alien nature of the AI. The team even tested the voice of the actor who played David's brother, but scrapped it immediately because it sounded awkward and flat, like a malfunctioning robot. Then, one afternoon, director Randall Kleiser happened to catch Pee-wee's Playhouse on TV. The mischievous, high-energy voice of Pee-wee Herman, performed by Paul Reubens, instantly clicked in his mind. That's Max. Reubens was invited to audition and was hired on the spot. To keep the casting a surprise, he was credited under the alias Paul Mall. Thanks to that decision, Max transformed from a cold machine into a warm, teasing companion that kids instantly loved. Even decades later, fans still cite Max's voice as essential to the character, rarely knowing it almost ended up dry, soulless, and completely different. 8. Many scenes and ideas were cut. When rewatching Flight of the Navigator, the film feels tight and well-paced, but the original version was far longer and more complex. Early drafts explained in detail that the ship was created from David's own locked memories. A fascinating idea, but one likely to confuse younger audiences. The original script also featured slug-like alien creatures, disturbing slimy beings with unsettling behaviour. These elements were cut entirely to keep the film family-friendly. Concerned that a longer, denser movie would lose children's attention, Disney forced the team to trim nearly all subplots and focus solely on David and Max's journey. As a result, Carolyn became more of an exposition character than a fully developed one. While it's a shame those ideas were lost, the cuts helped preserve the film's light, accessible tone, and that simplicity is a big reason it has endured so vividly in childhood memories. 7. Sarah Jessica Parker treated it as just a summer job. Sarah Jessica Parker appeared in Flight of the Navigator as Carolyn, the bright and capable NASA intern. But to her, it was simply a summer job. At just 21 years old, Parker was still building her career after a handful of small roles, and this film didn't leave much of an impression on her. Years later, after becoming famous for Sex and the City, she often laughed in interviews and said, "It was just a job, I wasn't that attached." For fans though, Carolyn remains memorable, a kind young woman who helps David understand a world that has moved on without him adding a gentle touch of warmth and romance to the sci-fi story. Even though her storyline was shortened, her presence still resonated. Parker has since admitted she's never re-watched the film, making the role something of a hidden gem in her long career. 6. The ship's design went through dozens of versions. The Trimaxion drone ship looks so smooth and realistic, it feels almost tangible, but getting there required dozens of discarded designs. Early concepts were clunky. One was mocked as a flying toaster, boxy and stiff. Another resembled a chrome-plated teapot, shiny but lifeless. Designer Michael Sheff, who also worked on Back to the Future, was brought in to refine the look. He combined inspirations from seashells' organic curves and reflective metal surfaces to create the final design, sleek, fluid, and mirror-like. Each iteration was hand-drawn, turned into small models, and tested with the era's primitive CGI. The team spent months finding the right balance, alien enough to feel otherworldly, yet friendly enough not to scare children. The result was a gleaming metal icon that transcended its humble origins, becoming a timeless design born from surprisingly ordinary ideas. 5. A soundtrack made entirely with synthesizers. Listening back to the Flight of the Navigator soundtrack, one thing immediately stands out: the entire score avoids a traditional orchestral sound. There are no sweeping violins, no pounding drums, only electronic synthesized tones that feel cold, airy, and unmistakably futuristic. This was a bold creative choice by Alan Silvestri, the composer who would later become famous for Back to the Future and The Avengers. Silvestri relied on the Synclavier, a massive digital synthesizer system, considered the most advanced musical computer of the 1980s. The machine weighed tons, cost millions of dollars, and was capable of producing highly complex sounds, layered textures, and spatial effects that ordinary synthesizers simply could not achieve. He spent months programming individual notes, crafting melodies that drift and float, sometimes sounding like echoes from a spacecraft lost in infinite space. This approach was radically different from Disney's usual musical style at the time, which favoured warm, classical scores performed by large orchestras. Here, Silvestri wanted the music to feel truly alien, strange, and unfamiliar, to match the ship and its journey through time. The result was a soundtrack that does more than accompany the film. It becomes a kind of third character, shaping the mood and amplifying the sense of mystery, loneliness, and quiet hope that defines the story. 4. The box office didn't explode. When Flight of the Navigator hit theatres in 1986, many people on the team hoped it would become a major hit. A gentle, charming science fiction film for children. Reality, however, was less spectacular. The production budget was around $9 million, modest by the standards of the time, but the domestic US box office reached only about $18.6 million. Some sources cite close to $19 million. the film was completely overshadowed by the year's blockbusters. Top Gun dominated theaters with Tom Cruise. The Karate Kid Part 2 continued its teen appeal, and James Cameron's Aliens delivered intense action. Released during a fiercely competitive summer, Flight of the Navigator also suffered from limited marketing as Disney hesitated to invest heavily after the failure of Return to Oz. Ticket sales were slow, older audiences paid little attention, and children were drawn to louder, more action-packed films. True success came later when the movie was widely released on VHS during the home video boom. Families rented it again and again, word of mouth spread, and it became a frequent fixture on cable TV and children's channels. Those late-night viewings and worn-out videotapes ultimately turned it into a cult classic. 3. Max wasn't just CG. Many people assume Max, the witty, intelligent ship, was entirely computer-generated, but the reality was more complex. To give Max a sense of weight and physical presence, the filmmakers combined CGI with practical puppetry. Mechanical effects operated by skilled technicians. The ship's interior was built as a physical set. Elements like robotic arms, blinking lights, and control panels were all real props actively operated on set. When Max spoke or moved, puppetry provided natural, tangible motion rather than weightless digital imagery. CGI was used mainly to add the liquid metal surface reflections and shape-shifting effects. This hybrid approach, mechanical and digital, was typical of the 1980s, when CGI wasn't advanced enough to fully replace practical effects. Thanks to this combination, Max felt more than just an effect. He felt alive, like a real companion beside David. In close-up shots, you can even notice small mechanical details and subtle metallic sounds elements that made the character more believable than ever. 2. Max's personality changes with David. At first, Max is a cold, intimidating machine. Emotionless voice, mechanical behaviour, and an attitude that treats David as little more than an experimental subject. But after scanning David's brain to correct system errors, everything changes. Max begins to imitate David's language mannerisms and even his sense of humour, from playful tones to casual, everyday speech. This process of evolution isn't just a technical gimmick, it's the emotional core of the film. The ship learns how to become a true companion. From a distant machine, Max gradually develops a personality, teasing David, worrying about him, even showing hints of jealousy when David longs for home. This detail makes Max far more relatable and lovable than the cold, emotionless AIs common in other films of the era. As a result, the relationship between David and Max becomes more than master and machine. It turns into a genuine friendship. One of the key reasons young audiences grew so attached to Max, seeing him as a real friend. 1. A film born amid financial chaos. Flight of the Navigator was created amid unprecedented financial turmoil. Viking Films. The Norwegian investor collapsed in the middle of production, dragging PSO Productions into bankruptcy as well. Disney, still haunted by the commercial failure of Return to Oz 1985, feared repeating the same mistake and hesitated to attach the Disney brand too prominently. The film's release was fragmented. In the United States, it carried the Disney logo. But in many other countries, only independent producers were credited, leading some audiences at the time to assume it was a European or indie film. With a tight budget, the crew had to shuttle back and forth between Florida and Norway, cut scenes, and even use local stand-ins to save money. Despite all this, the team remained committed, believing in the simple story of a boy and his ship. The result was a cult classic that survived over time, even if it wasn't a major success upon release. Looking back, that very chaos helped shape its unique charm, a modest childhood film Not flashy, but sincere and deeply warm. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share and subscribe so you won't miss our next videos. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next video.